I was under the hood of my '98 Mustang at 11:30 on a Tuesday night when my wife decided to end our marriage. Not that she put it that way, of course. Megan never did anything direct if she could make it complicated instead. "I'm going on a date with a coworker tomorrow, Jack," she said from the garage doorway, her voice carrying that particular ice-cold tone she'd perfected over the past 6 months. "If you can't handle it, that's your problem." I didn't look up from the carburetor I was adjusting. 22 years of marriage had taught me that eye contact during moments like these only encouraged her. Instead, I wiped my hands on an old rag and considered my response carefully. "If you walk out that door tomorrow night," I said, still focused on the engine, "everything changes. That's not a threat, Megan. It's a forecast." She laughed, that brittle sound she'd developed since her promotion to senior HR manager at Morrison Industries. "Right. What are you going to do, Jack? Fix my car to teach me a lesson?" I finally looked at her then. She stood there in her silk pajamas, the ones I'd bought her for Christmas 3 years ago, back when she still pretended to care about my opinion. Her auburn hair was pulled back in that severe bun she wore to work, even though it was nearly midnight. Everything about her posture screamed corporate efficiency, as if she were delivering a quarterly report instead of announcing her intention to cheat on her husband. "I'm going to do what I should have done months ago," I told her. "I'm going to stop pretending this is salvageable." "Good," she said, turning to go back inside. "Maybe you'll finally grow up." The screen door slammed behind her, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the smell of motor oil. I'd been working on this car for 3 months, ever since I noticed the first signs that my marriage was circling the drain. There's something therapeutic about fixing things that can actually be repaired. My name is Jack Morrison, no relation to the company that employs my wife, despite what half the town thinks. I run a small IT consulting business out of our basement, the kind of operation that keeps the lights on but doesn't impress anyone at dinner parties. Megan used to introduce me as my husband, the computer guy, back when she bothered introducing me at all. We live in Millbrook, one of those mid-sized cities that peaked sometime in the 1980s and has been sliding downhill ever since. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business, but nobody talks about it directly. Perfect for secrets, terrible for keeping them. I closed the hood of the Mustang and headed inside, past the kitchen where Megan was making herself a cup of herbal tea, her nightly ritual since she started her wellness journey 6 months ago. The same time, she started working late 3 nights a week and coming home with that particular glow that had nothing to do with yoga classes. "Don't wait up," she said without looking at me. "Wouldn't dream of it." Upstairs, I could hear our daughter Emily talking on the phone to one of her college friends. At 19, she'd inherited her mother's talent for selective awareness. She knew exactly what was happening in our house, but had chosen to treat it like background noise. Easier to focus on her social media presence than deal with her parents' imploding marriage. I went down to my office in the basement, ostensibly to catch up on some client work, but really because I needed to think. The space was cramped and cluttered. 2 desks covered with computer equipment, stacks of technical manuals, and the accumulated debris of 15 years in business. Not impressive, but it was mine. The thing about being an IT consultant is that you develop certain skills. You learn to dig through systems, find patterns, recover things people thought they'd deleted permanently. You become very good at seeing the whole picture when everyone else is focused on individual pieces. I'd been seeing pieces for months, late nights at the office that didn't correspond with any major projects, new clothes that were too expensive for our budget but somehow appeared in her closet anyway, a sudden interest in team-building exercises and professional development seminars that always seemed to happen at hotels across town, but I'd been hoping I was wrong. Right up until tonight, I'd been telling myself that 22 years of marriage had to count for something, that the woman who'd stood beside me when I started my business from nothing wouldn't throw it all away for whatever excitement she thought she was missing. Apparently, I'd been giving her too much credit. I pulled out Megan's old laptop, the one she'd replaced 6 months ago and assumed I'd recycled. Being married to an IT guy means your deleted files are never really gone, but she'd never been particularly tech-savvy. She'd used the same password for everything since 2005. Emily 2003, our daughter's name and birth year. It took me about 10 minutes to find what I was looking for. The messages went back 4 months. Nathan Reeves, another senior manager at Morrison Industries. 38 years old, divorced, the kind of guy who drove a BMW and wore cologne that cost more than most people's car payments. I'd met him exactly once, at the company Christmas party, where he'd spent 5 minutes explaining why my business model was quaint while staring at my wife's chest. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The early messages were professional enough. discussions about quarterly reviews and budget allocations, but by February they'd moved into more personal territory. Nathan complaining about his ex-wife, Megan sharing her frustrations with our stagnant marriage. By March, they were making plans. The hotel receipts were in a folder labeled Professional Development. The Riverside Inn, downtown Millbrook's attempt at luxury accommodations. 3 visits in the past month, always on nights when Megan claimed to be working late on special projects. I printed everything and put the copies in a manila envelope. And then I sat back in my chair and considered my options. I could confront her directly, but that would just lead to denials and counter-accusations. Megan had spent her entire career in HR. She knew how to deflect blame and make other people feel guilty for questioning her. I could try counseling, but we'd been down that road 2 years ago when I first started suspecting she was unhappy. 3 sessions of listening to her explain why my lack of ambition was holding her back, followed by 6 months of walking on eggshells while she decided whether our marriage was worth saving. Or I could do what she'd just given me permission to do. I could stop pretending this was salvageable and start planning for what came next. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You're not as clever as you think. L." I stared at the screen for a full minute, trying to figure out who would send something like that. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Someone knew I was digging into Megan's affairs. But who? I checked the laptop's browser history more carefully, looking for anything I might have missed. Most of it was predictable: work emails, online shopping, social media. But there was something odd about her communication patterns. Too many deleted conversations, too many gaps in her messaging history. Someone had been coaching her, teaching her how to cover her tracks, when to delete evidence, how to maintain plausible deniability. This wasn't just a simple affair, it was a coordinated campaign. The question was, coordinated by whom and why? I saved everything to an encrypted drive and shut down the laptop. Tomorrow, Megan would go on her date with Nathan, confident that her clueless husband was too busy playing with computers to notice what was happening in his own house. She was about to learn how wrong she could be. I woke up at 5:30 the next morning to find Megan already gone. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Client breakfast meeting, home late tonight," written in her precise handwriting. No mention of her date with Nathan, of course. She was maintaining the fiction that this was just another day in our normal, functional marriage. Emily wandered into the kitchen around 8, still in her pajamas, scrolling through her phone with the focused intensity of her generation. She grabbed a yogurt from the refrigerator and perched on one of the bar stools, barely acknowledging my presence. "Morning, sweetheart," I said, pouring myself a second cup of coffee. She replied, not looking up from her screen. "Your mother had an early meeting today." That got her attention, but only for a second. She glanced up, gave me a look that was equal parts pity and annoyance, then went back to her phone. "Dad," she said after a moment, "you know we can all see what's happening, right?" "What do you mean?" She sighed, the exaggerated sound of a teenager forced to explain something obvious to a particularly dense adult. "Mom's been weird for months. You've been walking around like someone stole your dog, and now you're both pretending everything's fine while having the most passive-aggressive conversations in human history." "Your mother and I are going through a rough patch," I said carefully, "but we're working on it." "Right." She stood up, tossing the empty yogurt container in the trash. "Well, when you're done working on it, maybe you could let me know if I need to pick sides for the divorce." She headed upstairs, leaving me alone with the uncomfortable realization that our family drama was apparently more obvious than I'd thought. If Emily could see through our pretense, who else had figured it out? I spent the morning working on client projects, but my heart wasn't in it. Every few minutes, I found myself checking the clock, calculating how many hours until Megan's date. By noon, I'd given up any pretense of productivity and decided to do some reconnaissance. Morrison Industries occupied a gleaming glass tower in downtown Millbrook, the kind of building that was supposed to signal economic revitalization, but mostly just made the surrounding neighborhood look more run down by comparison. I'd been there exactly twice, once for the Christmas party where I met Nathan, and once to pick up Megan when her car was in the shop. I parked across the street and settled in to watch. At 12:15, Megan emerged from the building with 3 other women, all dressed in the kind of expensive business attire that suggested they took their professional images very seriously. They walked to a nearby cafe, talking and laughing with the easy camaraderie of people who spent more time together than they did with their own families. One of the women was Lisa Chen, Megan's closest friend at work, and, according to my wife, the only person there who truly understood the challenges of being a professional woman in a male-dominated industry. Lisa was petite and sharp-featured, with short black hair, and the kind of intense energy that made her seem like she was always in motion, even when standing still. I'd met Lisa several times at company events, and she'd always been polite but distant, treating me with the kind of careful courtesy usually reserved for elderly relatives or small children. There was something about the way she looked at me, like she was evaluating my worth and finding me lacking. Now, watching her lean in close to whisper something that made Megan laugh, I wondered if she knew about the affair. More importantly, I wondered if she was the one who'd sent me that cryptic text message. At 12:45, Nathan Reeves walked out of the building. Even from across the street, he looked exactly like what Central Casting would order if they needed someone to play successful corporate executive. Tall, well-dressed, with the kind of confident stride that suggested he'd never doubted his place in the world for even a moment. He didn't join the women for lunch. Instead, he got into his silver BMW, the same car I'd seen in the hotel parking lot receipts, and drove away, probably heading somewhere to prepare for his big evening with my wife. I followed him. Nathan's apartment complex was called Riverside Towers, though it was neither particularly tall nor anywhere near the river. It was the kind of place that marketed itself to young professionals who wanted to feel sophisticated but couldn't afford actual luxury. All granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, with paper-thin walls and parking spaces barely wide enough for a compact car. He parked in spot 247 and headed inside, carrying what looked like a bag from an expensive men's clothing store, getting ready for his date, apparently. Making sure he looked his best when he took another man's wife to dinner. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching the building and trying to decide what to do next. I could confront him directly, but that would just alert him and Megan that I knew what was happening. Better to let them think they were still being clever while I gathered more information. My phone rang. Megan. "Hi, honey," she said, her voice bright and cheerful. "Just wanted to let you know I'll be very late tonight. We're having a team dinner to discuss the Henderson account, and you know how these things go." "Of course," I said. "The Henderson account. That's the big one, right?" "Exactly. I might not be home until after midnight, so don't wait up." "I won't. Have fun at your team dinner." "Thanks, sweetheart. Love you." She hung up before I could respond, which was probably for the best. I wasn't sure I could have managed to say "love you too" without choking on the words. I drove home and spent the afternoon planning. If Megan and Nathan thought they were being subtle, they were about to learn otherwise. But I needed to be smart about this. Emotional outbursts and dramatic confrontations might feel satisfying in the moment, but they wouldn't accomplish anything useful. What I needed was leverage, something that would make them understand that their actions had consequences, and that those consequences would be entirely of their own making. At 6 o'clock, I drove to the Riverside Inn. The hotel was trying hard to be upscale, with a lot of dark wood and brass fixtures that were supposed to suggest old-world elegance, but mostly just made the place feel dim and dated. The parking lot was half empty, which made Nathan's BMW easy to spot. He'd parked in a corner space, probably thinking he was being discreet. I parked 3 spaces away and pulled out my phone. The camera wasn't great, but it was good enough to document license plates and timestamps. Then I settled in to wait. Megan arrived at 6:45, driving her silver Lexus, the car we'd bought together 3 years ago when her promotion came through. She'd argued for something more practical, but I'd insisted on getting her something nice. A celebration of her success, I'd said, a symbol of how proud I was of her accomplishments. She parked next to Nathan's BMW and sat in her car for several minutes, checking her makeup in the rearview mirror. Even from a distance, I could see her hands shaking slightly. Nervous about her big evening, apparently. Nathan emerged from the hotel lobby and walked over to her car. He was wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than I made in a week, and he'd clearly spent time on his hair. He opened her door with an exaggerated flourish, like some kind of fairy tale prince, and she laughed as she got out. They walked into the hotel together, Nathan's hand on the small of her back in a gesture that was simultaneously possessive and intimate, the kind of touch that said they'd done this before, many times. I gave them 10 minutes to get settled, then walked into the lobby myself. The hotel bar was attached to the main restaurant, separated by a decorative screen that provided the illusion of privacy without actually blocking the view. I ordered a beer and positioned myself where I could see their table without being obvious about it. They were sitting close together, leaning in to whisper like teenagers sharing secrets. Megan was wearing the blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, and she'd done something different with her hair. She looked younger, happier, more alive than I'd seen her in months. Nathan was playing the part of the attentive suitor perfectly, hanging on her every word, making her laugh, touching her hand across the table. It was a polished performance, the kind of routine he'd probably used on dozens of women over the years. What bothered me most wasn't the intimacy. I'd been expecting that. It was how natural they looked together. how easily they fit into the roles of couple having a romantic dinner. Like this was where they belonged, and the rest of us were just obstacles to be managed. I finished my beer and left, but not before taking a few more photos of Nathan's car. Then I drove to the hardware store. 20 minutes later, I was back in the hotel parking lot with a small bag of supplies. The parking lot was still mostly empty, and the security cameras were old and poorly positioned. I had maybe 5 minutes before someone might notice what I was doing. I'd like to say I felt conflicted about what happened next, but that would be a lie. There was something deeply satisfying about using a small screwdriver to remove the air from Nathan's front tires. Not enough to cause a blowout, just enough to make them noticeably low. Then I used a permanent marker to write "Karma" in small letters on his rear windshield, positioned where he wouldn't see it until he walked around to the back of the car. It was petty and juvenile, exactly the kind of thing Megan would roll her eyes at if she knew I was capable of it, which was precisely why it felt so good. I was walking back to my car when my phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "Enjoying your little game? L." I stopped walking and looked around the parking lot, but I didn't see anyone watching me. Whoever L was, they were either very good at staying hidden or they weren't actually here. Maybe they were tracking me some other way, through my phone or through information from someone else. Lisa Chen. The initial made sense, and she certainly had access to Megan's schedule and plans. But why would she be warning me? And warning me about what, exactly? I got in my car and drove home, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. This felt bigger than just a simple affair between two coworkers. There were too many moving parts, too many people who seemed to know more than they were letting on. Emily was in the living room when I got home, laptop open, surrounded by textbooks and empty energy drink cans. She looked up when I walked in, studying my face with the kind of careful attention that made me wonder what she saw there. "How was your evening, Dad?" "Quiet," I said. "Just ran some errands. How's the studying going?" "It's not." She closed the laptop and leaned back against the couch cushions. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hung in the air between us, simple and direct, in a way that cut through all the careful pretense I'd been maintaining for months. Emily had her mother's eyes, dark brown and intelligent, but right now they reminded me more of my own, tired and sad and trying to prepare for disappointment. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said finally. "I honestly don't know." She nodded like that was the answer she'd been expecting. "Okay, just when you figure it out, could you maybe tell me before you tell everyone else? I'd rather not find out on social media." "Of course. Emily, whatever happens between your mother and me..." "I know, Dad. You both love me. You'll always be my parents. It's not my fault, all that stuff." She picked up her laptop again. "I'm going to finish this paper upstairs. Try not to do anything too dramatic while I'm gone, okay?" She headed upstairs, leaving me alone with the uncomfortable realization that my daughter was handling our family crisis with more maturity than either of her parents. I was still sitting in the living room when Megan came home at 1:15 in the morning. She tried to be quiet, but the garage door opener needed maintenance, and her heels clicked against the hardwood floors no matter how carefully she walked. She appeared in the living room doorway, looking slightly disheveled, but trying to project casual normalcy. "You're still up," she said. "Couldn't sleep? How was your team dinner?" "Long, productive. You know how Henderson can be. He wants everything perfect before he'll sign off on anything." She was a good liar. I had to give her that. Her voice was steady, her expression appropriately tired but satisfied. If I hadn't known exactly where she'd been and what she'd been doing, I might have believed her. "I'm sure Nathan was helpful with the presentation," I said. She froze for just a moment, so briefly that I might have imagined it, then nodded. "He always is. Very detail-oriented." "I bet he is. Well, I'm glad it went well. I'm going to head up to bed." I stood up and walked past her toward the stairs, close enough to smell her perfume. The same perfume she'd been wearing when she left, but now it was mixed with something else. Nathan's cologne, probably, clinging to her clothes and hair like evidence. "Jack?" she called after me. I turned back. "Thanks for understanding. About the late nights, I mean. I know it's been hard on you, having me gone so much." "Don't worry about it, Megan. I'm starting to understand a lot of things." I went upstairs and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to her move around downstairs. She spent 20 minutes in the kitchen, probably making tea and checking her phone, then another 10 minutes in the bathroom. When she finally came to bed, she was careful not to wake me, settling onto her side of the mattress like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. We lay there in the darkness, 2 feet apart, both pretending to sleep while our marriage continued its slow-motion collapse around us. Tomorrow, I decided, it was time to stop pretending. I woke up to find Megan already in the shower, humming something I didn't recognize. She sounded happy, genuinely unconsciously happy in a way I hadn't heard in months. There's nothing quite like the sound of your wife being cheerful about betraying you. By the time I made it downstairs, she was in the kitchen making breakfast. Not just coffee and toast, but actual breakfast. Eggs, bacon, fresh fruit arranged on a plate like she was running a bed and breakfast instead of trying to manage her guilt. "Good morning, honey," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I thought I'd make us a nice breakfast before work." "How thoughtful," I said, accepting the plate she handed me. "You seem to be in a good mood this morning." "I am? The Henderson presentation went so well last night that I think we're going to close the deal ahead of schedule. It feels good to have everything coming together, you know?" She was overcompensating, talking too much and too brightly, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. But there was something genuine underneath the performance, a glow that had nothing to do with closing business deals. Emily wandered in, took one look at the elaborate breakfast spread, and raised an eyebrow. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," Megan said quickly. "I just felt like cooking." "Right." Emily grabbed a piece of bacon and headed for the door. "I'm staying at Jessica's tonight, by the way. Study group." "On a Friday night?" I asked. "It's a very dedicated study group." She paused in the doorway and looked back at us, her expression unreadable. "You two have fun with whatever this is." After she left, Megan and I finished breakfast in relative silence. She kept glancing at her phone, and I could practically see her planning her day and her evening. Another date with Nathan, probably, now that the first one had gone so well. "I might be late again tonight," she said, confirming my suspicions. "We're having a follow-up meeting about Henderson, and then Lisa wants to grab drinks to celebrate." "Lisa Chen?" "Yes. You remember Lisa? My friend from work?" "Of course. The one who thinks I'm not good enough for you." Megan's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "She's never said anything like that." "She doesn't have to. It's written all over her face every time we meet." "You're being paranoid, Jack. Lisa barely knows you." "Maybe that's the problem." I finished my eggs and stood up, carrying my plate to the sink. Megan watched me with the careful attention of someone trying to figure out if they'd said something wrong. "Are you okay?" she asked. "You've been acting strange lately." "Strange how?" "I don't know. Different. Like you're angry about something but trying not to show it." "Maybe I am angry about something." "About what?" I turned to face her, studying her expression. She looked genuinely confused, like she couldn't imagine what I might have to be upset about. Either she was a better actress than I'd given her credit for, or she genuinely convinced herself that her behavior was justified. "Nothing specific," I said finally. "Just the usual midlife crisis stuff. Wondering if this is all there is, you know?" Relief flickered across her face. A midlife crisis she could handle. It was normal, predictable, the kind of thing that happened to men my age all the time. Much easier to deal with than a husband who'd figured out what she was really doing with her evenings. "Maybe you should talk to someone," she said. "A counselor or therapist. It might help you work through whatever you're feeling." "Maybe I will." She kissed me on the cheek, a quick, perfunctory gesture, and headed upstairs to finish getting ready for work. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the debris of her guilt breakfast, and tried to decide what to do next. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, but this time it wasn't the mysterious L. It was Nathan. "Your wife is amazing. You're a lucky man." I stared at the message for a full minute, trying to process the sheer audacity of it. He was taunting me, confident that I was too clueless to understand what he was really saying. Or maybe he was just stupid enough to think he was being clever. I deleted the message without responding and went down to my office. I had work to do. The first step was gathering more evidence. I'd already documented their hotel meetings and printed their message history, but I needed something more comprehensive, something that would make it impossible for either of them to deny what was happening. I started with Nathan's social media profiles. His Facebook page was a carefully curated collection of professional achievements and expensive hobbies. Photos of him at charity galas, skiing trips to Colorado, wine tastings with other successful young professionals. The kind of life that was designed to impress people and make them feel inadequate by comparison. But social media profiles only tell you what people want you to know. The real information is usually hidden deeper in the metadata and connection patterns that most people never think about. Nathan's LinkedIn profile showed he'd been at Morrison Industries for 3 years, hired as a senior manager in the marketing department. Before that, he'd worked for 2 other companies in similar roles, never staying anywhere for more than 4 years. The pattern suggested either ambition or restlessness, or maybe an inability to maintain professional relationships long term. His Instagram was more revealing. Lots of photos from bars and restaurants, always with different women. He had a type, professional, well-dressed, usually married based on the wedding rings I could spot in several photos. Nathan Reeves, it seemed, specialized in other men's wives. I was scrolling through his photos when I found something interesting. A picture from 6 months ago, taken at what looked like a company party. Nathan was standing with a group of Morrison Industries employees, including Megan and Lisa Chen, but it was the caption that caught my attention. Great strategy session with the team, big changes coming. 6 months ago was exactly when Megan had started working late and acting distant. It was also when she'd begun her wellness journey and started talking about how she needed more excitement in her life. I screenshot the photo and started digging deeper into the timeline. What I found made my stomach turn. Nathan hadn't just randomly decided to pursue my wife. This had been planned, coordinated, deliberate. The early messages I'd found were just the tip of the iceberg. There were older communications, deleted files, evidence of meetings and conversations that went back almost to the day Nathan had started at Morrison Industries. Someone had been feeding him information about Megan, her schedule, her interests, her vulnerabilities. Someone who knew her well enough to tell Nathan exactly how to approach her, what to say, how to make her feel special and appreciated. Someone like Lisa Chen. I pulled up Lisa's social media profiles and started cross-referencing dates and locations. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable. She'd been present at every key moment in Nathan and Megan's relationship. The company party where they'd first been photographed together, the professional development seminar where their affair had apparently begun, even some of the restaurants where they'd had their secret dinners. Lisa wasn't just Megan's friend and confidant. She was the architect of this entire situation. But why? What did she have to gain from destroying my marriage? I spent the next 2 hours digging through employment records, news articles, and business filings, looking for any connection between Lisa Chen and me. What I found made everything click into place. 5 years ago, I'd been hired to upgrade the computer systems for a small marketing firm called Creative Solutions. The job had gone smoothly until the final week, when I discovered that someone had been using the company's computers to run a side business, selling client information to competitors and skimming money from vendor payments. The someone had been Lisa Chen, then a junior account manager trying to supplement her income through creative bookkeeping and corporate espionage. I'd reported the theft to the company's owners, providing them with detailed evidence of what she'd been doing. She'd been fired immediately and blacklisted from several other firms in the area. Apparently, she'd landed on her feet at Morrison Industries. And apparently, she'd been holding a grudge. This wasn't just about Megan having an affair. This was about Lisa Chen orchestrating the destruction of my marriage as payback for costing her a job 5 years ago. She'd identified Nathan as the perfect weapon, charming, immoral, and attracted to married women, and she'd spent months maneuvering him and Megan into position. My phone rang, interrupting my research. It was Jimmy Kowalski, my old friend who ran a boxing gym downtown. We'd known each other since high school, and he was one of the few people I trusted completely. "Jack, you busy? I need to talk to you about something." "What's up, Jimmy?" "Not over the phone. Can you come down to the gym? It's about your wife." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Jimmy's cluttered office above the gym, listening to the sound of heavy bags being pounded by fighters training for their next matches. Jimmy was a big man who'd gone soft around the middle, but his eyes were still sharp and his instincts were still good. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this," he said, "but I saw Megan last night at Chez Laurent with some guy I didn't recognize. They looked close." "How close?" "Close enough that I figured you either knew about it or needed to know about it." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak for a moment. Jimmy had been married for 25 years. He knew what he'd seen. "There's more," he continued. "I asked around, and this isn't the first time. People have seen them together at different places around town. Always at night, always looking like they're trying not to be noticed." "How many people know?" "Enough. I'm sorry, Jack. I know this isn't easy to hear." "Actually, it is easy to hear. It's confirmation of what I already suspected." I told him about the evidence I'd gathered, the messages and hotel receipts and social media connections. I also told him about Lisa Chen and her apparent role in orchestrating the whole thing. Jimmy listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as I laid out the full scope of what had been happening. "So what are you going to do?" he asked when I finished. "I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve." "Jack, be careful. I know you're angry. Hell, I'm angry just hearing about it. But don't do anything stupid. Don't give them ammunition to use against you. I'm not going to do anything violent, if that's what you're worried about. But I'm also not going to just roll over and let them destroy my life without consequences." "What kind of consequences?" I smiled, and Jimmy must have seen something in my expression that made him nervous because he leaned back in his chair. The kind that fit the crime, I said. They want to play games? Fine, but they're about to learn that I'm better at this than they are. I left the gym with a plan forming in my mind. Megan and Nathan thought they were being clever, conducting their affair right under my nose while I played the role of the oblivious husband. Lisa thought she was getting her revenge by manipulating them into destroying my marriage. They were all about to discover how wrong they were. That evening, I put the first phase of my plan into action. I called Megan at work around 5 o'clock, just as she was probably getting ready to leave for another team meeting. "Hi, honey," I said. "I just wanted to let you know that I'm planning a surprise for you this weekend." "A surprise?" She sounded wary, like she was trying to figure out how this might interfere with her plans. "Nothing big, just dinner at Chez Laurent tomorrow night. I made reservations for 7:30. There was a long pause. Chez Laurent was where Jimmy had seen her with Nathan the night before. She was probably trying to figure out if I knew that, or if it was just an unfortunate coincidence. That's very sweet, Jack. But I might have to work late tomorrow. Can we maybe do it next weekend instead?" I already made the reservations, and I already arranged for Emily to stay at Jessica's house, so we'll have the whole evening to ourselves, just like old times. Jack, I really don't think... I insist. We haven't had a proper date night in months. It'll be good for us. I hung up before she could argue further, then sent a text to Nathan. "Looking forward to meeting you tomorrow night. 7:30 at Chez Laurent. Come alone." I sent it from a burner phone I'd picked up that afternoon, using a number he wouldn't recognize. Let him think it was Megan, changing their usual communication pattern for security reasons. Then I settled in to wait. Tomorrow night was going to be very interesting. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel sharp and clear. I spent the day preparing, checking, and double-checking every detail of what I had planned. By 6 o'clock, I was dressed in my best suit, the navy blue one Megan had bought me for her company's awards dinner 2 years ago, and ready to head downtown. Megan had spent the entire day in a state of barely controlled anxiety. She'd tried 3 different approaches to getting out of our dinner reservation, ranging from claiming she felt sick to insisting we couldn't afford to eat at such an expensive restaurant. When none of those worked, she'd attempted to reschedule for a different night, then suggested we invite Emily and make it a family dinner instead. I'd deflected every attempt with cheerful persistence, acting like a husband who was genuinely excited about a romantic evening with his wife, which, in a twisted way, I was. "You look beautiful," I told her as we got ready to leave. She was wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, probably something she'd bought for her dates with Nathan, and she'd spent over an hour on her hair and makeup. "Thank you," she said, but she couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Jack, are you sure about this? We could just order pizza and watch a movie at home." "Absolutely not. We're going to have a proper date night, just the 2 of us. No work, no distractions, no interruptions." The drive to Chez Laurent took 15 minutes, during which Megan checked her phone approximately every 30 seconds. She was probably trying to figure out how to warn Nathan that their usual meeting place had been compromised, but I'd made sure she wouldn't have the opportunity. "Let's make tonight special," I said as we pulled into the restaurant's parking lot. "No phones, no work talk. Just us." "Of course," she said, slipping her phone into her purse with obvious reluctance. Chez Laurent was the kind of restaurant that took itself very seriously. Dim lighting, expensive wine, waiters who acted like they were doing you a personal favor by bringing you food. The maitre d' recognized Megan immediately, which confirmed that she'd been there recently and often enough to be memorable. "Mrs. Morrison," he said with professional warmth, "how lovely to see you again. Your usual table?" Megan's face went pale. "Actually, we'd prefer something different tonight." "Of course. Right this way." He led us to a corner table with a clear view of the entire restaurant, including the entrance. Perfect for what I had planned. We ordered drinks, wine for her, scotch for me, and made small talk while we waited for the food to arrive. Megan kept glancing toward the door, clearly expecting Nathan to walk in at any moment. She was right to be worried. At exactly 7:30, Nathan Reeves entered the restaurant. He was dressed in an expensive charcoal suit and looked around the dining room with the confident air of a man who expected to be welcomed wherever he went. When he spotted Megan sitting with me, his expression shifted from confidence to confusion to something approaching panic. "Friend of yours?" I asked, following Megan's horrified gaze. No, I don't think so. He just looks familiar." Nathan stood frozen by the entrance for several seconds, clearly trying to decide what to do. He couldn't approach our table without making it obvious that he knew Megan personally, but he also couldn't just leave without looking suspicious. Finally, he allowed the maitre d' to seat him at a table across the room, where he had a clear view of us but couldn't overhear our conversation. "You know what?" I said, loud enough for my voice to carry. "I think I recognize him too. Isn't that Nathan from your office?" Megan's wineglass trembled in her hand. "Maybe. I'm not sure." "We should go say hello. It would be rude not to." "No." The word came out sharper than she'd intended, and several other diners turned to look at us. "I mean, we shouldn't interrupt his dinner. He's probably here on a date or something." "You're probably right. He does look like he's waiting for someone." I raised my voice slightly on the last part, making sure Nathan could hear me. His face darkened, and I could see him checking his phone, probably wondering why Megan had asked him to meet her at a restaurant where she was having dinner with her husband. The next hour was excruciating for both of them and deeply satisfying for me. Megan barely touched her food, too nervous to eat while trying to maintain normal conversation. Nathan sat alone at his table, ordering course after course to justify his continued presence while shooting increasingly desperate looks in our direction. Other diners began to notice the strange dynamic. A man dining alone, clearly agitated, staring at a married couple across the room. Whispers started at neighboring tables, and I could see the restaurant staff exchanging concerned glances. "This is nice," I said, reaching across the table to take Megan's hand. "We should do this more often." "Yes," she managed. "We should." "I've been thinking about our conversation the other night, about how everything changes. I think you were right. Maybe it's time for both of us to be more honest about what we want." Her hand went rigid in mine. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe we should stop pretending that everything is fine when it's not. Maybe we should acknowledge that we've both been looking for something that's missing from our marriage." Nathan's chair scraped against the floor as he stood up abruptly. He threw some cash on his table and headed for the exit, but not before stopping by our table. "Excuse me," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Megan, I think you dropped this outside." He placed a folded piece of paper next to her plate, then walked away without waiting for a response. Megan stared at the paper like it might explode, her face cycling through several shades of pale. "Aren't you going to see what it says?" I asked. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the paper. Written in Nathan's handwriting were the words, "What the hell is going on? Call me." "Work emergency?" I asked innocently. "Something like that." She crumpled the paper and shoved it into her purse. "Jack, I'm not feeling well. Can we please go home?" "Of course, sweetheart. Whatever you need." The drive home was silent, except for the sound of Megan's phone buzzing constantly with incoming calls and messages. She ignored them all, staring out the passenger window like she was trying to solve a complex mathematical equation. When we got home, she went straight upstairs, claiming she needed to lie down. I gave her 10 minutes, then followed. I found her in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with her phone pressed to her ear. She was speaking in urgent whispers, but the house was old and the walls were thin. "I don't know how he found out," she was saying. "Maybe he followed me, or maybe someone told him. Lisa, what am I supposed to do?" Lisa, so she was calling her co-conspirator for advice. "I can't just leave him," Megan continued. "We have a house, a business, Emily's college tuition. It's not that simple." There was a pause while she listened to whatever Lisa was telling her. "No, I don't think he has any real proof. He's just suspicious. Maybe if I'm more careful for a while, this will all blow over." Another pause. "You're right. I need to be smarter about this. More discreet." I'd heard enough. I walked into the bedroom, and Megan quickly ended the call. "Feeling better?" I asked. "A little. I think I just need some sleep." "Good idea. Oh, and Megan, next time you want to have a private conversation, you might want to close the bedroom door. Sound carries in this old house." Her face went white, but she didn't say anything. She just nodded and got ready for bed, moving like someone who was trying very hard not to do anything that might provoke a dangerous animal. We lay in bed that night, both pretending to sleep, both knowing that everything had changed. The pretense was over. The game had moved to a new level, and I was just getting started. Sunday morning, I woke up to find Megan already gone. She'd left a note saying she was going shopping with Lisa, but her car was still in the garage. Someone had picked her up. Probably Lisa herself, coming to collect her panicked co-conspirator for an emergency strategy session. I spent the morning implementing phase 2 of my plan. First, I created several fake social media accounts using photos and information I'd gathered about Nathan's ex-wife and former girlfriends. Then, I used those accounts to send friend requests to Nathan's current contacts, his coworkers, his family members, his drinking buddies from the country club. The messages were simple and devastating. "Did you know Nathan Reeves is having an affair with a married woman named Megan Morrison? I thought you should know what kind of person he really is. I included photos from their hotel meetings, screenshots of their messages, and detailed information about their relationship timeline. Within hours, Nathan's phone would be buzzing with calls from confused and angry friends and family members. Next, I turned my attention to Lisa Chen. I'd kept copies of all the evidence from her theft at Creative Solutions 5 years ago: financial records, email communications, witness statements. The statute of limitations had expired for criminal charges, but that didn't mean the information was useless. I created a comprehensive report documenting Lisa's history of corporate espionage and sent it to the HR department at Morrison Industries, along with a detailed analysis of how she'd been manipulating company employees for personal vengeance. I also sent copies to several of Morrison's major clients and competitors, with a note suggesting they might want to review any confidential information Lisa had access to during her employment. By the time Megan and Lisa finished their emergency meeting, both of their professional reputations would be in ruins. But I wasn't done yet. The final phase of my plan required a more personal touch. I spent the afternoon preparing for what would be the last honest conversation my wife and I would ever have. Megan came home around 4 o'clock, looking like she'd aged 5 years in a single day. Lisa had apparently given her some hard truths about the situation they'd created, and the reality was finally sinking in. "We need to talk," she said, standing in the doorway of my office. "Yes, we do." She sat down in the chair across from my desk, the same chair where she'd sat 3 years ago when we'd discussed refinancing the house, and 2 years ago when we'd planned Emily's college applications. Now she sat there like a defendant waiting for sentencing. "How long have you known?" she asked. "About the affair? Months? About Lisa's involvement? As of yesterday." She closed her eyes and took a shaky breath. "Jack, I know how this looks. It looks like my wife has been cheating on me with a coworker, while her best friend orchestrates the whole thing as revenge for something that happened 5 years ago. How does it look to you?" "It's not that simple. Explain it to me." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I was unhappy. We both were. We'd been growing apart for years, and I felt like we were just going through the motions. When Nathan started paying attention to me, making me feel attractive and interesting and valued, I know it was wrong, but I hadn't felt that way in so long. And Lisa? She was just being supportive. She listened when I needed someone to talk to, and she helped me figure out what I really wanted. "What you really wanted was to destroy our marriage." "No, that's not... I never wanted to hurt you, Jack. I just wanted to feel alive again." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You wanted to feel alive, so you decided to bury me, with help from someone who's been planning this revenge for 5 years. Lisa didn't plan anything. She was just... What? Coincidentally encouraging you to have an affair with the exact kind of man who would cause maximum damage to our marriage? She was just accidentally helping you cover your tracks and coaching you on how to lie to me more effectively?" Megan's composure finally cracked. "I don't know, okay? Maybe she did encourage me more than she should have. Maybe she had her own reasons for wanting to see you hurt. But that doesn't change the fact that I made my own choices." "Yes, you did, and now you get to live with the consequences." "What consequences?" I smiled, and she must have seen something in my expression that scared her, because she leaned back in her chair. By now, Nathan's friends and family know exactly what kind of man he is. His reputation is finished. Lisa's employers and clients know about her history of corporate theft and manipulation. Her career is over. And you... I paused, letting the suspense build. "You get to explain to Emily why her college fund is empty, why we're selling the house, and why her mother chose to throw away 22 years of marriage for a few months of excitement with a man who specializes in seducing other people's wives." The color drained from her face. "You can't do that. The house is in both our names, and Emily's education... The house is mortgaged to the hilt to cover the business expenses you've been ignoring while you played house with Nathan. Emily's college fund was invested in my company, which I'm dissolving as of tomorrow. And the prenup you insisted we sign when you got your promotion, the one that protects your assets in case of divorce, it has a very specific clause about adultery." She stared at me in horror as the full scope of what I'd planned became clear. "You've destroyed everything," she whispered. "No, Megan, you destroyed everything. I'm just making sure you understand what that means." She stood up on shaky legs, tears streaming down her face. "Jack, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can start over. I'll end things with Nathan. I'll never see Lisa again. Please don't do this." "You're 24 hours too late for that conversation. You had your chance to choose our marriage. You chose Nathan instead. I choose you now. I choose us. There is no us anymore. There's just the mess you made and the consequences you're going to live with." She left the room without another word, and I heard her on the phone again, probably calling Lisa to report that their plan had backfired spectacularly. But it was too late for damage control. The wheels were already in motion, and nothing they did now could stop what was coming. I sat in my office, surrounded by the evidence of my wife's betrayal and my own methodical revenge, and tried to figure out how I felt about what I'd accomplished. I should have felt satisfied. Justice had been served, the guilty parties had been punished, and I'd proven that I wasn't the pathetic, clueless husband they'd taken me for. Instead, I felt empty, hollow, like I'd won a war but lost everything worth fighting for in the process. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, I had one more call to make. I dialed Nathan's number, unsurprised when he answered on the first ring. "What do you want?" he snarled. "I want to thank you," I said, "for showing me exactly who my wife really is, and for making it so easy to destroy both of your lives. I couldn't have done it without you." "You're insane." "Maybe, but I'm not the one who just lost everything because I couldn't keep my hands off someone else's wife." I hung up before he could respond, then turned off my phone and went upstairs to pack a bag. It was time to leave Millbrook behind and start over somewhere new. Somewhere nobody knew the story of Jack Morrison and his spectacular revenge against the people who'd tried to destroy him. The game was over, and I'd won. But victory, I was learning, wasn't nearly as satisfying as I'd expected it to be. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood as I sat in Jimmy's office above the boxing gym, drinking coffee that tasted like motor oil and watching the local news coverage of what the anchor was calling a social media scandal that has rocked the professional community in Millbrook. Nathan's face filled the screen, his corporate headshot from Morrison Industries, back when he thought he was untouchable. The reporter was explaining how explosive allegations had surfaced over the weekend, leading to his immediate suspension pending an internal investigation. Sources close to the situation suggest that Mr. Reeves was involved in multiple inappropriate relationships with married colleagues. The anchor continued, raising questions about the company's workplace culture and oversight policies. Jimmy muted the television and turned to look at me. "You really went nuclear, didn't you?" "They started this war. I just finished it." "And how do you feel about that?" I considered the question while watching Nathan's silent image on the screen. How did I feel? Vindicated? Satisfied? Empty? Like I'm 45 years old and starting over from scratch because my wife decided she needed more excitement in her life. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got right now. My phone had been buzzing all morning with calls from reporters, neighbors, and people I hadn't spoken to in years who'd suddenly heard about the Morrison family drama. I'd ignored them all, but I couldn't ignore the knock on Jimmy's office door. Emily stood in the doorway, still in her pajamas and looking like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red from crying, and she was clutching her phone like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Dad, can we talk?" Jimmy excused himself, leaving us alone in the cluttered office. Emily sat down in the chair he'd vacated and stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Is it true?" she asked finally. "What everyone's saying about Mom and that guy from her work?" "Yes." "And you knew about it?" "Yes." "And you decided to destroy their lives instead of talking to me first?" The accusation hit harder than I'd expected. In all my careful planning, I'd thought about the impact on Megan, Nathan, and Lisa. I'd even considered the collateral damage to Morrison Industries and their other employees, but I hadn't really thought about how this would affect Emily. "Your mother made her choice," I said. "I just made sure there were consequences." "By ruining everything? Dad, do you have any idea what it's like to wake up and find out that your entire family is trending on social media? My friends are sending me screenshots of Mom's affair, asking if I knew, wanting to know if I'm okay. I can't even go to class without people staring at me." "Emily, and now you're telling me that my college fund is gone, that we're losing the house? You didn't just punish Mom, Dad. You punished me too." She was right, and I hated that she was right. In my focus on making Megan and her accomplices pay for what they'd done, I'd forgotten that Emily would be caught in the crossfire. "I'm sorry," I said. "I should have thought about how this would affect you. Sorry doesn't pay for my education. Sorry doesn't give me back my family." "Your family was already gone, sweetheart. Your mother saw to that." "No, Dad. You both saw to that. She chose to have an affair, and you chose to burn everything down instead of trying to fix it." Emily stood up and headed for the door, then paused and looked back at me. "For what it's worth, I think what Mom did was terrible. But what you did, I don't know if I can forgive either of you." She left, and I sat alone in Jimmy's office, staring at the muted television where they were now showing footage of Morrison Industries' corporate headquarters. Employees were streaming out of the building, probably heading home early to avoid the media circus that had descended on their workplace. My phone rang. Megan. Jack, we need to talk. I think we said everything we needed to say yesterday. Please. It's about Emily. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from my wife in the parking lot of a coffee shop halfway between the gym and our house. She looked terrible, pale, exhausted, like she'd aged a decade since Saturday night. She hates us both, Megan said without preamble. Can you blame her? No, but I can blame you for making it worse than it had to be. I made it worse? You could have handled this privately. We could have gotten divorced quietly, worked out custody and financial arrangements like adults. Instead, you turned our personal problems into a public spectacle. I turned our personal problems into a public spectacle. Megan, you were having an affair with your coworker in a hotel downtown. Half the city already knew about it before I did anything. That's not the same thing, and you know it. You're right, it's not the same thing. What you did was selfish and destructive. What I did was justice. She laughed bitterly. Justice? You destroyed Nathan's career, got Lisa fired, and humiliated our daughter on social media. That's not justice, Jack. That's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes revenge just makes everything worse for everyone involved. We sat in silence for several minutes, watching other customers come and go from the coffee shop. Normal people living normal lives, dealing with normal problems. I envied them. What do you want, Megan? I want to fix this. For Emily's sake, if not for ours. It's too late to fix anything. No, it's not. We can still salvage something from this mess. We can sell the house, split whatever equity is left, and make sure Emily can finish college. We can get divorced without any more drama, and we can both start over. And Nathan? Lisa? What about them? Nathan's already gone. He resigned this morning and left town. I don't know where he went, and I don't care. As for Lisa... She paused, looking uncomfortable. Lisa never meant for things to go this far. Lisa orchestrated the entire thing as revenge for something that happened 5 years ago. Maybe. Or maybe she just saw that I was unhappy and tried to help in the wrong way. Does it matter now? It matters to me. Why? Because you need someone to blame other than yourself? I need someone to blame other than myself for what exactly? For not being exciting enough to keep my wife interested? For building a successful business instead of climbing the corporate ladder? For trusting the woman I married to honor her vows? For giving up on us without even trying to fight for what we had? What we had was over the moment you decided Nathan Reeves was more interesting than your husband. Megan started crying then. Not the manipulative tears she'd used during our confrontation yesterday, but genuine grief for what we'd lost. I know I ruined everything, she said. I know I made terrible choices, and I know I hurt you in ways that can't be undone. But Jack, we were both miserable long before Nathan came along. We were just going through the motions, staying together out of habit instead of love. So you decided to have an affair instead of talking to me about it. I decided to feel something other than numb. I decided to remember what it was like to be wanted and appreciated and excited about life. Was that wrong? Yes. Did I handle it in the worst possible way? Absolutely. But I can't be sorry for wanting more than what we had. And I can't be sorry for making sure there were consequences for how you went about getting it. We looked at each other across the small table, two people who'd once promised to love each other for better or worse, now sitting in a parking lot negotiating the terms of our mutual destruction. So what happens now? She asked. Now you figure out how to rebuild your life without Nathan, without Lisa, and without me. I do the same thing, and we both try to minimize the damage to Emily. The house? Keep it. I'll sign over my half of the equity and take responsibility for the mortgage. Consider it my contribution to Emily's education. Jack, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Emily was right. She didn't deserve to be punished for our mistakes. I can't undo the public humiliation, but I can at least make sure she doesn't lose her home and her college fund. Megan nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just try to be the mother she deserves. Try to be better than you were as a wife. I left her sitting in the parking lot and drove home to pack the rest of my belongings. The house felt different now, not like home, but like a museum of a life I used to live. Photos of family vacations, Emily's school awards, the accumulated evidence of 22 years of marriage that had ended in betrayal and revenge. Emily was in the living room when I came downstairs with my suitcase, curled up on the couch with her laptop. She looked up when I entered, and I could see her trying to decide whether she was still angry with me. You're leaving? For a while. Your mother and I need some space to figure out what comes next. Are you getting divorced? Probably. But that doesn't mean I'm abandoning you, Emily. You're still my daughter, and I'll always be here when you need me. Even after what I said this morning. Especially after what you said this morning. You were right. I should have thought about how this would affect you. I should have talked to you before I decided to go to war with your mother. She closed the laptop and looked at me with eyes that were older than they'd been a week ago. Dad, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you still love her? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on anger and revenge that I hadn't really examined what was underneath all of that fury. I love the person she used to be, I said finally. I love the woman I married, the one who supported me when I started my business, the one who was so excited about being your mother. But that person, I don't think she exists anymore. Maybe she does. Maybe she just got lost for a while. Maybe, but I can't spend the rest of my life waiting for her to find her way back. Emily nodded, like that made sense to her. Where will you go? I'm not sure yet. Somewhere new, somewhere I can start over. Will you be okay? Eventually, will you? Eventually. I hugged her goodbye, and she held on longer than she had in years. When I finally let go, she was crying again, but she was also smiling. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you know. I drove away from the house where I'd lived for 15 years, past the neighbors who were probably watching from their windows and wondering what would happen next in the Morrison family drama. Past the coffee shop where I'd had my final conversation with Megan, past Morrison Industries where Nathan had once worked and Lisa had orchestrated her revenge. At the city limits, I pulled over and looked back at Millbrook one last time. Somewhere behind me, my wife was trying to figure out how to rebuild her life. My daughter was dealing with the aftermath of her parents' war. Nathan was starting over in some other city, hopefully having learned something about the consequences of seducing married women. Lisa was probably updating her resume and trying to explain to potential employers why her last job had ended so abruptly. And I was driving toward an uncertain future, carrying nothing but a suitcase full of clothes and a head full of memories I wasn't sure I wanted to keep. I'd won the war, just like I'd planned. I'd made sure that everyone who'd betrayed me paid a price for their actions. I'd proven that Jack Morrison wasn't the pathetic, clueless husband they'd taken him for. But victory felt a lot like losing when you were sitting alone in a car at the edge of town, with nowhere to go and no one waiting for you when you got there. I put the car in drive and headed toward the interstate, toward whatever came next for a 45-year-old man who'd just discovered that revenge was a lot easier to plan than it was to live with. Behind me, Millbrook disappeared in the rearview mirror, taking with it the last 22 years of my life and leaving me free to become whoever I was supposed to be next. The road stretched ahead, empty and full of possibilities I wasn't ready to imagine yet. But I kept driving anyway, because that's what you do when everything you thought you knew about your life turns out to be wrong. You keep moving forward, 1 mile at a time, until you figure out where you're supposed to end up. And you try not to look back at the wreckage you left behind.